Welcome to the Always On podcast. I'm your host, Duncan MacPherson. On this podcast, our objective is to enable our audience, which are very high caliber fee-for-service professionals, to continually and always be working on their business and on themselves. On today's podcast, I had a really solid conversation with Sten Morgan. He's the founder and president of Elite Advisor Network and Legacy Investment Planning. He is on Investment News' top 40 under 40 financial advisors nationally. And in this episode, we talked about a number of things, including his book, The 7 Mindsets of Success. Number 3 mindset, by the way, was be coachable. And that speaks to both the protege and the mentor advisor. We got into the demographic realities of the space and the opportunities to create alignment in terms of next gen, which ultimately means a financial advisor creating their own continuity and succession plan while being indispensable to their clients who have the same issues. So if you like this podcast, please like and share, tell your colleagues. If you have any ideas for topics down the road, just let us know. Thanks for listening. Well, we've got a very interesting addressable issue and audience on today's conversation. As you know, Pareto Systems typically works with established financial professionals who are thinking in terms of plateau avoidance and unlocking another level of productivity and efficiency. But there's a massive unmet need and audience, and that's the advisor who is new or 10 years or less in the space, up and coming. We're all very well aware of the demographic forces in play. In fact, I did a quick search just to validate this. The average age of the financial advisor in North America is just under 60. 26% are 65 or older, and they typically are working at the highest level. 46% are 10 years out or less from an exit or some form of retirement. So in this conversation, we're going to have a dual track conversation about the mentor-protégé dynamic. I'll get into that in a second. But I'm very excited about our guest here today, Sten Morgan. He's a successful financial advisor and, just as importantly, entrepreneur, which more and more financial advisors are realizing they too are business owners and entrepreneurs. He's the author of a very interesting book, The 7 Mindsets of Success. And Sten, the thing I love most about the title and the subtitle of the book is what you need to do to be successful, not just need to know, but what you need to do. So Sten, thanks very much for being on the Always On podcast.
You bet. Duncan, thanks for having me. I wrote that book when I was 28 and I laugh now. I'm 38 and I was like, I might need to refresh it because I thought I knew a lot more than I did at 28. But no, those are some core principles as I kind of was finding my way through the career and started with really no mentorship, didn't know there was a path, maybe partly got tricked into the business because if I really knew what it was going to take, I might not have done it. And I looked back and I said, man, now that I've kind of been punched in the face multiple times, I think at times entrepreneurship is like playing chess against Mike Tyson and he just punches you periodically. It's like I have to be strategic, while getting just thrown off and surprised constantly. That book was okay. As I reflected on, becoming one of the youngest advisors on Chairman's Council, top 30 under 40 in the country at age 30, I was like, okay, so people are wondering, what did I do? And I think most of us know there's no magic piece to it, but I do think there's common themes to people that are resilient, that don't give up, that push through maybe what they think their potential is to the next level. So yeah, that book took me a while to write. It was awesome. We've written a couple since. But yeah, no, I'm excited to dive into the topic today because it's something I get excited about.
Well, and great segue because mindset number 3 was be coachable. And I mean, that is one thing that separates the best from the rest in any field of endeavor is just a real sense of self-awareness and humility. I think it was Confucius who said that humility is the foundation of all virtue and success is having zero self-importance, understanding that we don't have all the answers. And that is timeless. That applies to everybody forever. So let's get into this because it is an aging sector in the marketplace. I think there's going to emerge phenomenal opportunities for protege advisors And for the alignment between the protege and the mentor who does not have a continuity and succession plan in place. And there's a way to elevate the client experience based on the 80-20 rule. I'll get into that in a second. But Sten, I'm just going to put you on the spot. What is your offering and what is your value proposition as an advisor to advisors? Because you are still an advisor today, but now you're also an advisor to advisors. Just tell us, what is that value prop and who do you specifically work with?
So as I looked back at my story, and I did the pretty traditional path, I was like, hey, I'm going to sell insurance for a while. And then I was like, insurance isn't that exciting. Investments sound really sexy. I'm going to be that advisor. So insurance was always a solution in this world. Investments were always a solution in this world. And I'd moved to Nashville, 22, didn't know anybody. And I was like, if I'm just going to fight for or try to sell insurance to a bunch of people I don't know, like this is probably going to be the average path. Like 10 years from now, I may be, successful advisor. A lot of us, if we don't give up in the business, will eventually be, 50-year-old advisors with a great book of business and a great income. Like that path existed, but part of me was like, I just didn't want to wait that long. So what I had to give myself permission to do is actually get paid for my time and ideas. And this was a novel concept years ago. When I started talking about it, broker-dealers were freaking out. Like, hey, you don't really charge for financial plans. You give that away for free. And then you sell them insurance or you get their, like that is the core model of our industry. And I said, I don't think I'm going to make the business long enough if I just take that approach. And so I ventured down the road of like, what if I built an experience and an engagement that people are willing to pay for? And they actually are smiling when they hand me a check. And if I help them with their insurance later, like awesome, but how can I just bring a profitable product to the marketplace that's based on sitting in a room with me? There's a lot of head trash around that because I'm like, one, am I allowed to sell that? I still have advisors calling like, Sten, you're not allowed to sell financial planning because you're getting paid on the or the insurance. I'm like, no, those are different things. And the consumer sees those as different things. It's really us as advisors that get in our way. And so when I get a hold of the young advisor and I'm like, hey, do you know you're worth something apart from the products? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, you can actually get paid well for coaching, inspiring, and guiding people to make financial decisions. And what was cool about that in my story was that opened up real estate investors. It opened up entrepreneurs, like this whole new group of clients that, young advisor Sten would call and say, hey, do you want to buy insurance? And they'd hang up. Or, hey, can I manage your, I don't even know you. And now it gave me this new offering. Hey, I don't have to sell you anything. Like I can just give you great ideas and keep you accountable and help you build a path, and I can get paid really well for it. So for younger advisors, it's like, hey, here's a revenue stream that you aren't aware of or you don't feel comfortable implementing, but I can help you do it. But what's really cool is we've had advisors up to 30-year vets come to some of our live events, and they're like, Sten, I just needed permission because what I'm realizing is I'm more valuable now than I've ever been, but I'm still giving away all my time and ideas for free. I'm not saying stop doing it or stop doing insurance, like still do that well, but imagine putting a process into your practice when you sit with somebody, if they don't want to move their money today or buy insurance today, you still can add value and get paid really well for it. And then you can get the AUM and insurance when the time is right. And so we're now, working nationally with some really big firms. Like this wave is here. The advisor of the future is able to get paid for their time and ideas. I just feel like there's still a lot of advisors that are stuck in the old path.
Well, there's a no man's land there between transactional and directional, where obviously advisors moved into advisory. Mm-hmm. And I mean, obviously from a recurring revenue perspective, that, just let them relax a little bit and think more strategically. And just the concept of fee worthiness. Like, I think you are right. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, as the commoditization of the space continues, the model will flip at where the unmet need, especially with that type of client you described, they will crave and appreciate and gladly pay for directional planning.
Yep.
So you've cracked that code and now you make that available to other advisors so that they're not reinventing the wheel and maybe having the speed bumps or hiccups that you had as you were trying to figure this out.
Yeah, and we have, for example, we once a quarter do a live event here in my office in Nashville where in a day and a half, I'll give you the whole system. Because I awkwardly made it in like 5 or 6 years of planning of like, wait, this didn't work. And what fee am I going to charge people? I started charging the least fee I think they would say yes to because I was in my head. And I started increasing that to eventually I'd charge way too big of a fee where they saw me as kind of like an employee and they expected too much. And so there's all these things that I had to kind of, run through the brush first.
Right.
And now I'm saying, well, hey, don't recreate all of that. Like start helping people tomorrow and take this process and use it. And then the other piece is just our ongoing community of advisors that just want to, like, and this is what you've been doing so well for years, is like, keep accountable, don't get lazy. Like, any of us in a vacuum are going to under succeed. Like, we will fall short of our potential if we rely too heavily on ourselves, but we need some outside influence. We are a product of who we hang out with. And I think, unfortunately, most advisors are hanging out with just the people that happen to be in their office. The bad news is you didn't get to pick all those people, most likely. Like, you're just in an office with people, or you're just not intentional enough around getting around people that make you uncomfortable. And so I think that's a core element also. But even fundamentally, it's like, hey, if you need a system to overcome the head trash and like put new revenue in your business, that's something we've dialed in.
And I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit because I've got a little track I want to follow, but I'm going to assume your ideal client, as I've gotten to know you a little bit better, is someone who's newer in the business or just approaching their stride, like 10 years or less in the business. Is that your ideal advisor?
I think if somebody's 3 or 4 years in the business where they realize, like, okay, here's what it means to be a financial advisor. And I've kind of seen maybe, what the average model looks like. Like, if I don't get a hold of myself now, I'm probably gonna be swept up in that average path. But then we have some awesome advisors that, they've sold insurance for a long time. They're like, I'm making enough money, but I feel like I'm missing something in my practice. And then we have advisors that only sell investments. And they're like, I feel like I'm just kind of doing one thing. And to be honest, I think I could add a lot more value, but how do I do it? And so I would say for anybody listening that you are, 2 to 7 years in the business, like, we will open your eyes to a whole new way of doing business that'll help you grow and get more business faster. And if you are 7+ years in the business and you're like, I think my practice can be more dynamic and I want to level up, then we'll give it to you to add tomorrow. What's great for you is if you're like, I'm confident I already know how to sell something, you already have a book of business to go back to, right? And say, hey, by the way, I've added something new. What you don't want to do is you don't want to go back to those same clients and give them the same thing and just start billing them for it. Like, that's going to be like, wait, you're giving me the same Whopper, but now you're charging me for it. That doesn't feel good. But if you say, hey, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing before, but you need to know that when the time is right, we also have this other process I want to put you through. And we teach advisors to go through their book of business and tell every one of their clients, hey, every 3 to 5 years, we need to do a deeper dive in your planning. Right. That's about a $4,500, $5,000 engagement. So, like, we need to start preparing to pay that fee. And as an advisor, you're essentially coaching them to save up to pay you to help them more. What you don't want to do is all of a sudden go to your book tomorrow and be like, hey, it's going to be, $5,000 a year to work with me on top of it. That would not be wise. But there is a graceful way, because what you don't want is, me to run into one of your best clients and do my process. And all of a sudden they say, well, my advisor just talks to me about investments. They haven't talked to me about all this stuff. You would be frustrated because you'd be like, wait, I am doing all that stuff. Well, you're doing it behind the scenes and they don't know about it. So every one of your clients today, whether you're 3 years in the business or 30 years in the business, needs to know you have a process that's comprehensive and deep. And even if you're already doing it, they don't know about it, put it on a one-pager and show them, hey, here are the categories we cover for you. I just want you to know that we're working behind the scenes for you all the time. And I think most advisors are getting comfortable and they don't understand there's a difference between what they're doing for their client and what the client thinks they're doing.
Okay, so let me see if I got this. So first of all, the advisor who is proven to be viable but wants to be sustainable but not get on a collision course of a plateau. They want to unlock full productivity potential. Okay, great. The future pacing, where there's a gradual sort of seed planting for clients. This is where it's going, letting them get their head around that. So that would probably counter the sticker shock of that fee and help them see the merit and the value that is a very good investment. Okay, that's great.
And a lot of what we talk about is even if you don't turn the fee on, like even if you don't flick the switch to start getting paid, most of us can level up our experience and our communication ability. And so we can all become better coaches, encouragers, and inspirers starting tomorrow. So one thing we teach advisors to do is every meeting you have from this day forward, you call it a strategy meeting. You're never again going to have an initial review. You're never going to have like a review meeting again. Like that just is all like, hey, let's look back, and like you're expecting to sit here and I'm going to have a yellow pad and we're going to kind of look at some performance and then talk again in 12 months. Like in that room, the energy slowly drains out. Right. You're kind of meeting expectations. Like you are giving them what they expect in that meeting, which is like, I guess I have to do this because I'm a responsible adult. But what if they came in and all of a sudden you were standing up on a whiteboard teaching them something new? Like they'd be like, wait, what's happening right now? Because you're taking the posture more of like a coach. in a teacher, as opposed to like, I'm your advisor, here's some data reports. And I love our live events. I've done this with 30 advisors in the room, and I've done it with like 70 or 80 in a room. And I'm like, imagine doing this. And what's cool is the advisors, obviously you get a little uncomfortable. There's part of your body that wants to resist change. But then when I give you permission to be a better communicator and actually enjoy your job, like when people leave meetings with me, they're like, Sten, when can we meet again? Like, I don't have to ask them or force them like I used to when I was younger to be like, hey, can I meet next week? Can I come to your house on Saturday night? Now they're like, if I get in a room with Sten for 45 minutes to an hour, really good things happen. And it's actually kind of a fun meeting. So I think for us, I'm trying to redefine how the public thinks of us. And imagine if your meetings were meetings that your clients actually got excited about.
Well, and I have to assume for that 3 to 7 year advisor, this helps address the reputational equity and mileage question. Okay. Like how much can you know? You're so new, and that would undermine their ability to attract a high quality, sophisticated, complex client. If they're more fixated on process and the fluid and dynamic nature of that value and the planning strategically, probably help counter that, right?
I think so. Yeah. I look back to when I was a young advisor, and I could never stop them from like coming to a meeting and being like, oh, you seem young, but they really just want to work with somebody that's really good at their job. And so, 5 minutes in, I bet I got them to forget about how old I was because of what I was bringing, the confidence, the experience. I think one element of that is just becoming a great communicator, and we help advisors with that. The other element is like, are you good at your job? And so when I moved to Nashville, I was like, I just technically need to be better than other people, because if I save somebody money with an idea, I bet they'll do business with me. We may not be best friends. We may not be in the same stage of life, but I bet if I'm just that good at my job, it'll help me get business. But then I had to realize something I feared, public speaking, that I avoided my whole life. I realized my ability to communicate well might be the thing standing between a client taking action on something. And as soon as I kind of took responsibility for that, that's when I started taking speaking courses, started working with other advisors on it. I put a whiteboard up in my office so I could actually stand up and have a more engaging meeting. So what's cool is we've done our live events, and we'll have advisors that are 55 years old, making $2 million a year, that the industry would say like, hey, you're done. Good job. But they come to our event for a day and a half in Nashville, and I'm teaching them how to illustrate cool ideas on the whiteboard. Hey, here are the 3 buckets. Hey, what if you paid your kids? And the first few are cringeworthy. Like we're 30 advisors in a room, and we're all sitting there like, this is hard to watch. But in a day and a half, this advisor was humble enough, like you said, to come and be like, I know I could be better. And they leave, and they'll email me months later being like, my job is so much more fun now. Because I actually enjoy my meetings. I'm not just like going through the motions anymore. And so I think there's these cool elements of the stuff we teach that are universal skills that our industry has not emphasized, that I think now we can say, hey, you actually have permission to be great at communicating. Hey, you have permission to at least give somebody an option to pay you a fee, because I'm going to tell you there's a bunch of people that want to do that. They're looking for an advisor that has a process that is like, we'll do 3-month engagements for $15,000. And some advisors are like, that's crazy. And it's like, no, because it's so valuable. And the people want that. So for us to unlock that for people is exciting when they leave an event. Like, I used to think the world was this way, but now I see it as this way. And so we love doing that. And we have another one coming up in October, whenever this drops, October 20th and 21st in Nashville. I think we have a few seats open, but that's a fun immerse yourself event, get uncomfortable, leave changed kind of thing. And I love doing those.
Okay, cool. You made a statement there, and I want everybody to just grasp this fully. Be good at your job. And that's that whole advice. I mean, it's sage, but what does it really mean? I remember working with, and this goes back probably 20 years ago, advisors who were a couple of years in, and I was just sort of in myself. And I asked them, I said, so who's your ideal client? What do they want? And how do you establish professional contrast? How do you get their attention and be attractive to them? And these advisors were so fixated on technical ability. And I said, that's a given. Being good at your job is you've got to get inside their heads and help them identify the fact that they have unmet needs that align with your expertise and your process. So I'll give you an example of that. I said to advisors, who said, my ideal client is a business owner or professional or executive, first generation. earned money. Nobody gave me anything. They overnight, 25-year overnight success story.
Yeah.
I said, okay, if that's your ideal client, what do they want? What are their unmet needs? And we would do a dig on this. And I said, be a serious student. Like, first of all, read The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Understand the mindset of an entrepreneur. Read The Millionaire Next Door by Tom Stanley. Study the space. And then the third thing, as I said, contact business owners and don't ask for their business. Ask for their insight. You know the old saying, if you ask someone for money, you get advice. If you ask someone for advice, you'll get money. I said to these advisors, I said, contact business owners and just simply say, hey, you know what? I'm a newer financial advisor. I come from a background of entrepreneurship. I've made the decision. I want to be a specialist, not a generalist. I want to work with business owners. Can I buy you lunch? Can I pick your brain? Could you tell me what it is I need to know to be attractive to business owners down the road? And yeah, a bit of a numbers game, a little bit of spray and pray. But there's sort of an unwritten rule in entrepreneurship that every entrepreneur, every business owner, every first gen had a mentor, and now they are the mentor, and they can take somebody under their wing and give them a little guidance. And sure enough, based on chemistry, rapport, alignment, and just sort of that intangible chemistry, these advisors got their foot in the door and got some business, but more importantly, got the insight and the direction that gave them that credibility. And the rest is history. It took time, but they just got themselves on a path. So I'm curious, like you're talking about the whiteboard, so many advisors, they say to me, I need a pitch book. And I'm like, no, that's the last thing you need. You don't need pitching. You need positioning. The whiteboard
will create a lot of activity and make you feel good when it's in your hand, but it may not lead to any result.
And now you're just swimming in a pool of sameness. You just look like everybody else. The whiteboard dynamic, that's positioning. So it's not a pitch. It's not a presentation. It's more of an overview and an introduction to a process to see if there's alignment. So I gave you a lot there, but I'm curious as to how that lines up with your philosophy and approach.
Yeah, I think first what I was feeling, the stories in my past that were coming up as you said that, I didn't think of myself as a business owner at first. And so I think it was hard for me to have business owner conversations until I hired a bunch of people and lost them and had to, what's culture? What are the things I go to bed worrying about? And so it's like, I think life will teach you some of these things, but I also, the Lord put in me, like, I don't want to take this 30-year path of like letting life teach me all these lessons the hard way. How do I tap into people? And so I wrote a book called Wish I Knew That Sooner, and I found this really cool ghostwriter. He was like a mad scientist looking guy. I flew down to Florida and met him at a Panera Bread next to the airport. And I was like, I want to write this book. And it's really about all the ideas most advisors don't talk about because there's no product attached to it. And I was like, I don't know what the title is going to be. And he was like, you've already said the title a few times. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, wish I knew that sooner. Because I hear that a lot from people. Like, man, if I only would have known that. Like, if I only knew to check that box in my taxes, like, people have a fear of regret and losing out. And so I started calling business owners and asking the questions that you're talking about. Like, hey, what were some of the biggest lessons you've had in life? How can I tap into that? And I remember this one guy told me, he's like, I was making the same amount of money with 20 employees as I was with 200. And he's like, one of my biggest takeaways, and this guy was probably 70 at the time, like done a bunch of big name. But again, to your point, people will actually take those meetings. Like if your head trash is like, nobody would ever meet with me. Like these people want to help. He said, complicated is not always better. I use that almost all the time when I meet with business owners now, because it's true. Like most of us just tack things on, there's fires going on, and like we get fueled off complexity and activity.
Yeah.
And when I sit in a room with somebody, I was like, something I've learned from working with a lot of business owners and even in my businesses is that complicated is not always better. If there's a simpler way to get to our end goal, I'd rather take that one. And you can be them like they think and they nod their head and all of a sudden you're in. And so I think there's an element of you'll learn stuff as you go in business if you don't give up. But there are these resources, books. Now that I've written 3 of them, I'm like, man, that's 18 months of my life each time. And you get to read that and access it for $15. Like leaders read and readers lead. You should be doing that all the time. But yeah, who can you get around and tap into it? Because this is creating in you an awareness. And the most big successful people I know seem to be the most aware, one personally of themselves, but also of like the world around them and what other people are looking for. And I think as entrepreneurs, like we need to raise our awareness as quick as possible because it does help us connect better with people.
Okay, so you just hit on something around friction. And it's funny because I went on to Chat GPT and I just said, summarize the Founder's Mentality book by James Allen and Chris Zook. And it's everything you talked about in terms of complexity being the silent killer of growth. You know, that analogy of the 20 employees to 200, perfect example. And the reason why I like this exercise is, you know, there's often I've read a book 10 years ago, and I mean, it's gone, right? The diminished intent and memory and all that, retention. But I go back and I just ask for a summary of the salient points, and there it is, just as a refresh.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Entrepreneurs like to help other entrepreneurs reduce friction and not reinvent the wheel.
Something I've learned that helped me in a different, I could read 3 books on the same topic and one of them was framed the right way that it just hits with my story. Part of what I've learned about being in business and being an advisor is that all of us are facing resistance every day. It's like, why is success not like a passive activity? And I meet with a lot of advisors, coach a lot of advisors, and there's somehow like shame attached to like, man, I haven't reached this goal or this thing hasn't worked out. And I had some of that early on too. You know, single mom, raised 4 of us kids, you know, why are those people successful? We're not, maybe it's not for us. Like this kind of story gets written that a lot of us hold on to too long. And until we kind of wake up and realize like, why am I basing my life on this story that's not really true? And for me, it was realizing resistance is waiting for me when I wake up. Like I'm actually going to think of it as a form. And this thing's goal every day is for me to fail. And so I'm a pretty competitive guy. And, you know, I'm like, I want to wake up and like win every day. And winning every day is not waking up and being unaware of the forces acting against you. It's business is hard. And if you don't fight, you're going to fail. And so we built a framework we call the resist framework for advisors. And there's categories that all of us are pressed in on. And I think Advisor's great book called Essentialism, it's really easy for us to focus on too many things at once. And I know with a lot of high level advisors you work with, like there's probably so much opportunity for them that the really good ones get good at saying no to most of them, but it's easy to get distracted. And so for advisors in this framework we've built, it's like at every point in time, you need to know what is the main form of resistance that's holding you back that you need to conquer first before you move on to the next one. For some advisors, that's revenue, or others, it's execution or what we call leadership. Like, do you have a good team? Are you hiring well? Mm-hmm. Is it your systems? It's like, hey, I get people to say yes, but it breaks whenever they go through it. Is it your thinking? Is it your speaking or communication ability? And so as we walk through this framework, for me, it helped as a business owner, entrepreneur to say, there's a force acting against me every day that if I don't wake up with some level of intention, I'm going to fall backwards because it's pushing me. Like I got to lean into it and get better. And I think there's groups of advisors in our industry that are kind of coasting. They got comfortable enough. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, you get to actually solve higher quality problems now. You're no longer fighting for your survival, but you're fighting for your business's future. And is it new advisors? Are you going to plan for an exit? If it's an exit, let's plan ahead for it. If it's transition, let's plan ahead for it. Where I run into a lot of advisors that are kind of just saying, I think I'm just going to ride this thing out and hope it works out. Mm-hmm. So I think all of us can have more intention.
Feeling like you've hit a plateau? Or maybe you're growing, but it's costing you time, energy, and clarity. At Pareto Systems, we've created the ultimate guide to financial advisor coaching. A no-fluff, insight-packed resource to help you assess if coaching is right for you. Whether you're just starting out, scaling up, or preparing to transition your business, this guide breaks down what to expect, what to avoid, and how to make the most of the process. Download it now. The link is in the description of this podcast. And now, back to the show.
Well, and there's a mindset there. Like being at peace with friction. Like if you fully expand your thinking philosophically, you just say, look, we need friction to appreciate the groove.
Yeah.
You look at anybody in life where it just seems effortless, whether it's a golfer, athlete, any type of high performer. I don't know how, I mean, it wasn't effortless in the beginning, probably. They had some friction, and how they dealt with the friction gave the groove meaning. One of the byproducts of that is not taking anything for granted.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a neat mindset there as well. Okay, so Stan, let's get into the weeds a little bit more. So I
Sure.
want to talk about this mentor-protégé dynamic. So we had a call a while back, and you said something to me that I thought was pretty profound. And you framed it, if I remember correctly, as, so you want to become a financial advisor. And you were talking about the next crop of advisors that are perhaps in school or maybe in a job. They might be in an accounting position and they're unfulfilled, and they're thinking, you know what? Like with you said, okay, insurance, it's fine. It's a transaction, but I want to level up. I want to be more panoramic. Talk
Yep.
to me about the advice you give to somebody who is a protege. How can they find their stride, and what is the right approach? Give us your 2 cents there.
Yeah, I think there's a couple angles to this. I think about the high level people you coach, like that. They have a perspective that we have to be aware of, and it makes me think of a book, Business Made Simple, where when you enter into a business, you need to find out like what's keeping the owner up at night. Like, how do I 5x my salary as quick as possible so I become irreplaceable? And I think with a lot of the seasoned advisors I work with and get to hang around and still learn from, there's this element of frustration of like, well, what are we going to do now? Like there's not this wave of talented studs coming up that giving us a peace of mind to let this business go on, and we get to step aside and maybe be involved just enough because we want to be involved, but I don't have to run it every day and do it. And so I do think there's this element of like, well, there's not enough talent coming. What are we going to do?
Mm.
But also I flip that and I'm like, I don't know if we're preparing the talent very well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is almost an industry problem, because it's like, how do we tell people before they get their first internship, here's what it looks like to be a financial advisor. Oh, and by the way, there's multiple paths you can take. There's an average path or there's an elite path. And the elite path requires X, Y, and Z. Well, to do X, Y, and Z, you have to tap into something in yourself that you maybe are not aware of yet. Maybe it's true that there's a generation coming that hasn't experienced a bunch of traditional adversity. And there's a great saying, I think, something where it's like, strong times create strong, or hard times create strong men create good times create weak men. It's like, we do live in the safest, quick access society in the world, which is a blessing, but also we have to be aware of like, okay, that maybe that's handicapping us when it comes to adversity and tenacity. And so there's some part of me, because I didn't have a path. I didn't really have a lot of mentorship when I got in the business, of saying, well, how do they even know about it before they accept the internship and realize like, oh, financial advising, selling. Oh, it's communication. Oh, I actually have to have technical expertise. Like I can't, like I got to dive into the books. And so I think there's kind of a couple ways to attack it. And I know that's why we got excited talking about it, because, you and I address different markets where it's like successful business owners that are like, how am I going to transition? Also mirrored and kind of paired with, what's the responsibility to get these people teed up and set better expectations so we have less turnover? I remember there was a term at the firm I originally started with where they said it's like crashing Ferraris, because every, person that quit, you pretty much lost 200 grand on them or so, because the training and the time, but only 1 out of 10 might make it. I was like, there's got to be a better way than that. Like there has to, it's probably not 100%, but it shouldn't be 10 at the end of the day. And so that's something my team that we're working on, kind of how do we build content? How do we at scale improve that terrible metric that we've all kind of,
Accepted,
been accepted for so long.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Well, let's get into this, because here's something I've noticed, because a lot of my friends are sort of at the same stage in life as I am, and kids in their 20s. And there was a bit of a window there where we started to feel like in that demographic, there was a fair amount of either learned helplessness or entitlement.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very exciting to see these people in their 20s develop probably arguably the most important quality, which is self-motivation. Like nobody wants it more than them. Nobody needs to nag at them to work harder, show up early. you're seeing this emerge. So I think it's going to be very exciting. But I think there's a responsibility for us mentors to foster that, create that culture, create that environment of experiential learning, and just to encourage that self-motivation.
I do think if your main motivation is personal income, you're going to shy away from certain challenges.
Mhm.
Like if people ask me, like, Sten, why do you coach and teach like your practice? You could have retired in your late 20s and just hung out. And I was like, I could have, but like that's not my purpose on this planet, is to, what they would say, the lazy man's utopia or the curse of comfort. And so I think if there's something in you, and the way I see the world now, as I've reframed it for myself, is that like resistance is winning. Like resistance is a person sitting on your chest every morning. If you're like, I think I'm good, like I've reached my potential. And so for advisors that are no longer scared to pay their bills, and they're like, wow, if I just wake up, most average advisors have an 85 plus retention rate because people don't take the time to shop it around and change it. I can make $1 million this year by doing nothing. I would argue that's not a good thing. I would argue that's a form of resistance because it wants you to be comfortable. It wants you to check out. And I think there's advisors that get to the point where it's like, I hit my personal income goal. Well, how do I become a better entrepreneur? I had to become a much better leader, and I had to hire better. I had to set better on-ramps for people to get trained. I had to learn you can actually do high support, but you can also do high challenge at the same time. But how do you do that well?
Yeah.
And so for the advisors listening, where it's like, I'm pretty comfortable, I'm kind of coasting, I would challenge you and say, okay, but what's the higher quality problem to solve? What's the future version of you that's like, the challenge is no longer financial based. It's I'm going to bring up the next generation. I'm going to take on the challenge of bringing somebody on and training them from scratch and spending time with them like that. Nothing about that is easy at all. Like I would say most of the time, if I didn't have to deal with employees or clients, like my life would be super easy. Like stepping into stuff with people is like the highest impact thing you can do, but it's also the most challenging at the same time.
Well, I think you touch on that in your book, and the whole premise of one of the mindsets is just who you become, and that whole premise of self-actualization and that best version of you is not defined by how much you earn. It's the impact you have on others and your ability to just keep finding another gear. So
that future self conversation, you probably take it in an unhealthy way, but for me, it's the idea of like, I try to visualize I'm sitting across from the table of myself 5 or 10 years from now. And is there an element of like, man, what were you doing? Like, why'd you not work out in the morning? Like, why weren't you focused on what you were eating? Like that. And I think in all of us, we kind of have an idea of like what would set ourselves up best in the future. And in the past, I would kind of beat myself up because I'm like, wait, why am I not doing that thing I need to do? Like I want to learn how to play guitar. Like why would I just watch TV instead of doing that? Because I know my future self would be like, dude, learn how to play guitar. Like what a cool skill. Pull it out at the campfire and surprise everybody. You're the man. But I couldn't do it. And then I folded into that story resistance. And I was like, okay, there's actually a reason I'm not doing it. Like there's a force that's like causing me to be lazy and not do it. And then you have a book like, Atomic Habits. Like none of us are exempt from resistance. We all have to overcome a lazy nature. Like that's affecting all of us. But some people figure out a way to kind of crack through that and get a little more efficient, become a little more effective. To your point, you have to sit in resistance and kind of let it flow around you and not let it toss you around. And what's cool is I think that's something we can all find. It's just for you unlocking, like, why am I not leaning into that? Why am I not running my race so well that I'm actually running? And I know some men like this that are 80 years old, still mentoring, still waking up, serving. But I think I know a lot more people that are just hanging out. And so for all of us, what is the future self? Is our future self going to want to reach across the table and like shake us? Like, what are you doing? Or is he going to be like, hey, thank you. Like, thank you for cold plunging in the morning. Hey, thank you for caring about what you eat. Like, and I don't know how many of us pause to have that conversation in our head.
Let's talk a little bit about the mentor-protégé dynamic. This is simplified, but starts with self-awareness. Where are you? I mean, every advisor I've met is either coasting, cresting, or climbing. Coasting, just minimum requirement for whatever reason, minimal adaptation, life is good. The safety net of good markets and a continual run has become a hammock.
Yeah.
And no disrespect, but there's going to be a lot of anticlimax and a collision course with obsolescence based on commoditization. Okay. There's nobody like that listening here.
Yep.
Some advisors are cresting, growing personally, professionally, economically, but they're on a collision course with a plateau because they haven't addressed their capacity issues.
Mm.
And then you got the climbing. The climbers are working on themselves personally, professionally, coachable, few nagging doubts, meaning we haven't fully cracked the code. So let's talk about that as it relates to what a mentor can do to bring on some proteges and maximize that.
The question I was thinking about this as you said that, is there, because you work with a lot of these high level advisors, is there a percentage you could put to each one of those categories? Are they kind of evenly split, or is it kind of heavily weighted towards the coasting?
Well, here's what's interesting about that question is that based on our momentum, I think a lot of the coasters look at us and say to themselves, even in the back of their minds, subconsciously, they look at our approach and they say, it's just easier not to do that. That just looks like work.
Oh yeah.
And so it's almost like a natural sifter. So we don't tend to attract people where they have the money, but they don't have the will. Because again, you've seen it before as well, like the whole 10,000 hours dynamic, whether it's guitar or golf or any pursuit, it's starting and sticking and seeing it through. It's not just having the aspiration, like there's some actions that have to kick in there. So we naturally sort of avoid the coasters. The cresters are incredibly motivated because they realize, okay, I don't want to keep working this hard.
Yeah.
Okay. And to your point, I mean, there are advisors that we see that do crack the code and their expenditure of effort declines because there is less friction in the way they conduct themselves. The climbers are interesting because their level of there's no limiting beliefs that are self-fulfilling. They realize, okay, I met a financial advisor at a conference who has bought 37 businesses in the last 5 years, has a team of 55 people, and he is no smarter than me. In fact, he told me that. Those guys, it's incredible because it's like, how high is high? So anyway, I appreciate the question, but yeah, it's an interesting place that we're at right now. But let's get into the mentor-protege dynamic. There's got to be a fixation on facilitating culture, environment, and just removing the mystery. We put it to advisors this way. Your responsibility is to demystify, like remove the mystery, give absolute specificity and clarity to what it is you're trying to accomplish and how it's going to be accomplished. Okay, so demystify, depersonalize. Okay, you're not fixated just on talent. You put as much emphasis on process as you do on individual skills. And then, so you have demystify, depersonalize, and then decommoditize. Let's keep finding ways to ensure people focus on what we're worth, not what we cost. So how does a mentor bring all of that to life? I mean, just chip away at that.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is I want to give credit to Michael Kitsis as we were having a conversation a while ago, and he called me out. And he's like, Sten, I think you have to battle this part of you that just wants to hire somebody that's going to come in and just do their job perfectly right away. And if I could find that 5 to 6 year advisor that's having quite a bit of success, they've kind of figured it out and they can just come join my business and just like make me more money, I'm waiting around for those. Well, the issue is you're going to wait a long time. If somebody's kind of broken through that and they're making enough money to support themselves, they've already seen the path of like, hey, I'm just going to keep building this for myself. Like, why would I take a step back and make money for somebody else? And some do that, but I think there's a bigger group of people in this industry that are capable of being great advisors. But if left to the system and the grinder, they may not make it. And so for me, I had to reframe. And even as a young advisor, realizing, wait, I can actually be a mentor sooner than I think. Like there's people that are, I'm only 30. Who's going to listen to me? And it's like, no, you can step into a role of leadership much sooner than you might think. But I also think there's a lot of untapped knowledge and guidance that advisors maybe don't see themselves as mentors yet, or they don't want to step into what that entails. I mean, I had to do a lot of personal kind of like emotional work to be able to sit in a conversation and have a young advisor be like, hey, this isn't fair. And as opposed to me being like, hey, you want to know what fair is? Like, I wore a suit and sat in a cube for 10 years. Like, that my response would be like, well, tell me, what do you mean by that? And how can I sit in that with them? So I think there's these skill sets we have to develop, and there'll be skills you'll be glad you have and you'll never regret having. But I have to learn to say I can have high support, but also high challenge with you. And so to your point, I think you need to have a system in place. If you welcome somebody into a mess of a business, that's not a gift. Like, a gift is order. A gift is simplicity. It's clarity is a gift for a new person. But for me, as opposed to like, hey, just hang around me, because this was early versions for me. Come to meetings and you kind of just do my busy work and you'll eventually learn. Is it grew into an intention of, hey, you're going to do these things for the first 6 months and you're going to be so good at it. These are going to become superpowers for you that you're better than anybody. You're going to build our financial plans to 70% of their completeness, and then I'll review it, but you're going to own that. And so I think there's this element of you're not taking max risk. I'm not giving somebody a client on day one, but I am giving them things that there's a little bit of risk, but not too much, so they can feel ownership in it. And I think that's a system you have to create. What's their 30, 60, 90-day plan?
Mm-hmm.
You will not reach your potential on your own. And I don't know the stat around solo advisors with 1 or 2 staff that are just hanging out. And I would also say, everyone listening, maybe this isn't for you. Like, I think nothing Duncan and I are saying are like, if you're listening, you have to do this tomorrow, you're not doing a good job. Like, but if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, the stuff they're saying is tapping into a part of me, I think that's an indication of like, okay, maybe I am called to a different purpose, or I want to solve a higher quality problem in business. But when you said the word system, I think that hit with me, because that was a big difference in my business of bringing on young talent and saying, hey, good luck. I'm here if you need me, but figure it out like I figured it out. You have something I didn't, which is a mentor that's willing to help if you ask for it. And that's had to evolve to like, not only am I here if you need the help, but I've actually built an on-ramp that has some structure to it to, make it a little easier, but it's still going to be hard. I tell people, I interviewed somebody today, I was like, this is not an easy place to work. But for the right person, you will achieve things in 2 to 3 years that most people take 10. And so if you're setting expectations well and you're giving them a path, I think that's something at large that we're kind of missing.
I had a eureka moment about 5 years ago. So I've been telling advisors, make yourself obsolete. Okay. So it's not the Sten show.
Yeah.
Lao Tzu, I just pulled this back up. He talked about leadership is when those around you who are following you barely know you're there. And his philosophy deeper, and this AI just gave me this, the best leaders are those who operate with subtlety and facilitate their team's success without needing constant attention or acclaim. It's a great mindset, right? A great philosophy. I'll give you an example of that today. And I see advisors do this. So we're onboarding a new team member today. Our business is growing, and I just get out of the way. I don't micromanage.
Nice.
So my crew showed me, first of all, back in the early days of selecting the team member, they showed us the fit process. Where's the alignment? Sifting out candidates to establish highest probability. This is a good fit. They just showed me today the onboarding process. It's like a 4-page checklist, like a pilot's flight plan. Like, just, I'm looking at this document. I'm going, this is unbelievable clarity, specificity, and just removing the mystery. Like, this is how we onboard somebody. I'm absolutely convinced that, somebody coming in new, that sort of sitting up a little straighter, like, okay, this is real. And they're not hiring and then leaving me to my own devices. Yeah. This is the game plan. This is the vision. This is what we do. This is how we onboard. You can go into AI right now and say, I'm a financial advisor. I want to hire a client experience associate who can elevate how our clients feel about being part of our community. Build me an org chart, build me a roles and responsibilities, build me, what I need. What considerations do I need to make? Boom. Then Okay, we hired this person. Build me an onboarding process to fast track them to mastery. Boom, it's right there. Like the concept of having a business that serves your life, not the other way around, you reverse engineer that. What are you trying to accomplish? Build it out. Use AI, use process. It'll liberate you as the lead advisor to get more strategic, have more fulfillment, more gratitude. It's just a phenomenal exercise to go through.
I love that. Yeah, I don't think there's really an excuse except you're not willing to kind of sit in the process, and AI can obviously accelerate that.
Yeah.
If you sit in a room with a clean whiteboard for 30 minutes, like you can make quite a bit of progress on probably anything you're stuck on. You can outsource it. The great book, Who Not How. It's like, maybe you are not the one to solve that. Like I bet, bash on Duncan, but I bet that document was better than what Duncan could have come up with. And that's great. Someone else bringing you something where you're like, hey, this is actually really good. Like for me, the more I see that as a business owner is it kind of builds the confidence in me that like, it's not always about me. Like I don't always come up with the best ideas. And what's a relief when we coach advisors is that experience you just mentioned, there's versions to it. Like come up with version 3 and then it's Gitmo, good enough to move on, and then come back and fix it later and level it up. But if you're like, man, I have to have this onboarding process that's so perfect before I can hire somebody, that's just head trash. Like get good enough to move on and then start taking these steps. A black belt is a white belt that never gave up. Like at some point you just have to enter into the game versus, creating reasons not to play. I have a cousin that lives in San Diego, who's a big CrossFit athlete. And at the time, I think she wanted to use it as a dating app across CrossFit gyms. But I said, hey, no, what if they can challenge each other in competition? And so we started building this website. And I flew down, met with this designer in San Diego, this web designer, and super cool guy. And he kind of was like, okay, I can tell these people don't really know what they're doing, so I'm going to coach them up a little bit. And he said like 90% of websites that he's built never launch. And he's like, because people get stuck in the activity and the iteration of it, and it has to be perfect, and they never do anything with it. And so his advice to me was like, hey, at some point you just have to go to market with something. And so I don't think it's reckless. I don't think anybody listening, the stuff we're talking about, you should just try tomorrow. Like I think a system is important, but also it doesn't have to be perfect because then you'll never do anything.
Well, I've been saying for years, done is better than perfect, but I might have to steal your Gitmo.
Good enough to move on.
Possible you've got as many sound bites. Your command and retention for sound bites is right up there. I'm impressed. It's interesting, back to your point about I could have never created that document, the onboarding document. There's absolutely no question about it. It would have been so narrow in terms of what I thought. These guys are just so big picture. But here's the interesting thing about that. Like if you want somebody to buy into your dream, you got to buy into theirs.
Yeah.
Like there's an interesting dynamic. The old saying that show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. Like creating an environment where there's incentive for somebody to buy into your dream because you're bought into theirs. That's such an incredible force. And you can only do that if you get out of the weeds and away from the minutia, because that's probably where the head trash gets born. Okay.
There's so much purpose and activity I find, and I've been susceptible to this to where it's like, man, there's nothing like a busy day. And you're like, wow, that was great. Until you're able to look back and realize like, I don't think I really did anything. And so for people I've been able to hang around and get challenged by, it's like results are all that matter. Like if it takes you an hour or 10 hours, like give me the result. And if you could do it for less time and money, like let's find that path. And I find a lot of advisors I'm with, like there's the thrill of the busy day versus the awareness of, wait, I could probably stop doing a lot of this stuff and I wouldn't feel it a lot. I might feel it a little bit, but is there a better use of my time? And for advisors that feel lonely, because this can be a lonely business, I'm isolated, especially if you're a leader listening, you're like, I can't have conversations with these people because they don't get it. Well, get around other leaders, get around other advisors that run practices, because there's so many things we can share. And in our community, we'll have advisors jump on and be like, hey, my fact finder's not great. And all of a sudden, boom, 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 here's 3 fact finders, go use it. There's so many places to go to get these things solved faster. And you just have to develop a process. Okay, step 1, we put it through AI. Great. Step 2, we iterate it internally to make it our language. Step 3, we put it through AI again. And then I send it to 3 advisors I know and get their feedback, and then we're done. And that took something that maybe you would have sat with in your head and not done for 3 months, but you put it through a process and a system. And I think it's just the tenacity piece of it. So I'm going to sit in this thing and make it better and not give up. That somehow advisors I work with, we almost have to help tap them into that. And not that any of us get there and stay there forever. I have ups and downs in my career and personal life, but the more alone you are, I think the more susceptible you are to resistance winning, to head trash winning. And that's why I love what you do. I mean, good coaches are worth their weight in gold, because you could walk into a room for 5 minutes, say one thing, and change their business. And so if anybody's listening and you're like, hey, I'm on an island, I feel alone, I feel like I'm dealing with issues and no one else is, that's not true. Just start getting yourself around other people and you'll all of a sudden start realizing it's still challenging, but it's not just me.
Okay, well said. I'm going to put you on the spot here, Sten. So
Sure.
There's a massive developing need of, for lack of a better term, matchmaking, taking a protege and aligning them with a mentor. So my advice to a younger advisor is, yeah, you can do it. You can break through, but there's a lot of friction there. I would suggest you draft in behind somebody who has no continuity and succession plan, is probably thinking 3 to 5 years they are going to exit or at least emerge into that work optional lifestyle mode.
Yeah.
At a minimum, they've got an 80-20 dynamic where 80% of their clients represent 20% of their business. And there's probably a vein of gold of untapped opportunity in there, but they just don't have the ability to draw it out. Do you have, because we've talked about this superficially, but
yeah,
are you going to go there in terms of brokering relationships between a protege and a mentor to help them achieve a breakthrough collectively? Is that part of your game?
I think that's a bigger vision that would help our business a lot, especially with kind of the trends we've been talking about for a long time. I don't know how many conferences I've been to where we're talking about this aging advisor population. And it's like, okay, now it's at some point going to come to a head. And I think for young advisors, like if you are ready, you will reap the benefits of that transition. If you're not ready, you're going to be a few years too late. And, you'll probably still benefit from transfers of assets on a global scale, but like you will have always looked back and said, I missed that. So I think at a macro scale, that's something, and I look forward to kind of jamming out with you on that topic of like, what does it look like to help address that? But I would say, I think there's a responsibility of the older advisors to be open-minded, but I would shift and say for the young people, there's an opportunity to bring a business plan to an experienced entrepreneur and advisor and convince them of your value. Part of that, to the golden vein you mentioned, is how many books of business have not been mined for financial planning opportunities?
Incredible.
And I'm like, man, the kids, and it happens to us all the time. It's like, your A+ clients could pay for financial plans as a Christmas gift to their kids. I would caution you to give it away for free, because then there's really not a lot of value placed on it.
Right.
You don't have to make it the most profitable thing in your business, but like start learning to speak in a way of like, we have a process that's valuable apart from the products. Like, what if you as a young advisor or even a new advisor in the industry went to a senior advisor and said, here's my 3-year business plan to reinvigorate your business, to mine for opportunity. And I want to share in that with you. And here's where I think the future could be for us. I think there's a lot of us as older advisors that are almost like hungry for somebody to come and knock on our door and be like, can I have 30 minutes? Sit down. I want to blow your mind. And I think there's lessons to be learned in that. Like, what is a business plan? How do you communicate it? But if you're listening and you're like, I want to do that, I just don't know how to do it. Well, ask for help. Like those are the things that we help people with, is like thinking like a business owner, maybe before you've learned that lesson the hard way. Huge opportunity though, like you've pointed out a lot, like there's a group over here that needs this group over here and vice versa. What does it look like to connect them? I think the older advisors have to be ready to tolerate some of the discomfort of hard conversations, getting frustrated when you're like, what are you thinking? Well, it's the same stuff we probably have with our kids. Like, your brain's
best place to get there. The best place to get there, if you're the senior advisor, is to remind yourself you're doing your client a disservice by not building this out. Okay. Right. So the 80%, that vein of gold. So you're doing them a disservice by letting them have a suboptimal experience. The greater community. Now listen, if you're a senior advisor and you attracted a protege, they're elevating the 80% and liberating you to grow up market and go deeper with the 20% who generate 80% of the business. You
It's so worth
elevate
it.
from the minutia and the weeds and the hassle factor. You got a brand within a brand, and then you build familiarity so that that protege can earn the right to say, okay, I'm the person that's going to take over this business, or it might be a combination of two or more people down the road. But I would say, Stan, that that's something based on your backstory, based on your awareness for technology, your philosophy, your approach in general, this is something you should pursue. And if you do, I would gladly shine some light on it. So there we go.
Thank you for that.
Let's wrap
I
this
think
up.
I'll end with saying kind of last thing keeps coming to my mind is if you're listening and your main motivation is your personal income, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is probably not landing. Maybe that's your path and that's fine. But if there's some part of you that's like, it has been my whole goal in life is like, am I taking time off? Am I hanging out? And I've built this thing that now is like a cool ATM for me. There's taking some time to tap into like, but is this really what I'm here to offer the world? Whether that's part of your faith or just your personal thing. Like, I'm thankful that somehow earlier in my career, I tapped into something other than my personal income or like cool trips. Because if that was my main motivator, I think there's walls I would have hit that I wouldn't have pushed through.
Yeah.
I think we all need something that's motivating, that's higher than income.
Well, I think I've scared a lot of those people away over the years because I don't emphasize that. I mean, but I will say this. I mean, I think it was Zig Ziglar who said, money isn't everything, but it ranks up there with oxygen. So, but yeah, so I want someone to land in the sweet spot in terms of maximizing how much they're earning and who they are becoming simultaneously, not one at the expense of the other. You can literally have it all. It does take time. Sten, so again, just to circle back, so your ideal client, your wheelhouse is somebody who's demonstrated viability. They're self-motivated. Now they're thinking about sustainability and self-actualization, typically 10 years or less in the business. Is that's your ideal client? Perfectly?
Yeah, I think those people, we change your world in a day and a half.
Okay.
If you hang out with us, like I'll say things that were kind of my experience that'll kind of blow your mind. You know, caution, once you see things, there's some things you can't unsee, like you will forever be changed. So be ready for that. But yeah, we have advisors that are 15, 20 years in the business that are like, hey, I'm successful, but I'm looking for a shot in the arm, especially if you're like, I want to get paid for my time and ideas. Whether you're 2 years in the business, 1 year in the business, or 30 years in the business, if you're like, I want to do that and I should, we can teach you guys that system. And we have advisors come to this event and within 2 weeks, they've made $20,000 off financial planning fees that they never were paid for before. And so I think that's the system, that event we have coming up. We can get you the link to that.
Yeah.
I would say those are our superpowers.
Best place to go get to learn more is gobeelite.com.
Yep. We got some cool resources on there, a bunch of whiteboard videos I've filmed. So if any advisors like, I want to get better at that, you can go see the ones I've done.
Okay.
I send that stuff to my clients. We teach it at our events. Try to find something that you could level up dramatically and do it. And we have some of those things. Obviously, Duncan, you have those things, but rarely do I see that kind of change happen when you're alone and you're just in your own head.
Okay. And just to clarify, so if somebody's in the insurance or risk management space, but they want to add income streams and be more panoramic and process driven, you'll address that. If maybe they've sort of been around for a while, but I've realized, okay, I've got another 5 to 10 years. I want to get to the next level. Okay. So gobeelite.com. Sten, great chat. We can definitely have you back. Fun. And I think there's a way for us in the spirit of co-opetition to collaborate going forward. But I really hope you build out that brokerage, that bridge between the protege and the mentor, because I think that need is going to get more significant. I think you can own that space, frankly. So let's talk about that in the future. Okay.
All right, bud. Sounds good.
Thanks for your time.
All right, bye.
Thank you for listening to Always On with Duncan MacPherson, where our objective is to enable professionals to always be working on their business and on themselves. Want to learn more about Duncan and his team? Visit ParetoSystems.com. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and/or guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Pareto Systems. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.